Welcome to the Gold Standard here on the 440 Sports Network. My name is Braden Gall. You can get to me on twitter.com, and it is good to be back in the United States of America, where Canada is competing for a championship for the first time since who knows when. Welcome to the show, everybody. Emma and Michael, how are you guys?
Fantastic.
I wanted to let Mike go first because I knew he'd be the most enthusiastic. So, yeah.
I'm carrying the show. I bring the energy every week.
He does. It's true.
It's good to see you guys. We got Juuse Saros rumors swirling, of course, sure to be silly and debunked quickly. But are they? I've got one free agent name that I've sort of changed my opinion on, and I want to get your thoughts on it in real time. I have not told either of you who this player is, but I'll make my case, and then you guys can tell me how wrong I am. It's totally fine. But I've kind of changed my opinion on that. Also, we've got the NHL Draft is coming up in just a couple of weeks, and I kind of wanted to give everybody sort of a 101 class, a primer. What is some top-level 10,000-foot stuff folks need to know about the draft this far out? I know, Michael, you're deep in the weeds on the scouting combine and all kinds of stuff. I know this is one of your favorite months of the year, so we'll dive into sort of an NHL Draft primer, and then we'll look at Edmonton versus Florida in the Stanley Cup Final. All 7 games will be on ABC, of course, and lots of storylines to get into with that matchup. I'm really interested in the matchup. So lots of stuff going on. How was everybody's week off? Everybody good? You rested up and ready to go?
I am not. My vacation was sabotaged by my dogs. We had to worry about them because we took them to Michigan, and all hell broke loose, so that was fun.
That's like, isn't that, for those that don't know, Michael has like 180 pounds of dog.
Yes.
Isn't that right? About give or take. Did you drive them? You drove 180 pounds of dog to Michigan?
We did. Yes, we could. Our normal dog sitter wasn't available, and we couldn't find a place to board them in time, so we had to take them with us, and that was fun.
How many stops?
They weren't that bad, actually. The ride there and the ride back was actually pretty smooth sailing. It's once we got there and they were in unfamiliar territory and we were in different Airbnbs and stuff, they were freaking out. So
that's a lot of work. That sounds like more work than a kid, honestly.
Yeah, it was not fun. So the wife and I are taking a beach vacation in August to make up for it. We're leaving the dogs here. Then we're going to get our rest and relaxation in.
There you go. All right. Thanks, Michael. Emma, of course, are we wearing the Wake Forest hat for a particular reason?
Because I'm proud to be a Demon Deacon. That's What more reason do you need?
I don't know.
It's definitely not because I'm getting my hair done later today and it looks like shit. That's definitely not why.
I was going to ask about the college baseball tournament, but
yeah, maybe don't ask about that because the wound is still a little fresh, but
it could be worse. You could be a Vandy fan.
True. Still proud to be a Deacon always.
Well, I'm not gonna rub it in too much then. While my 7-year-old cheered on the Big Orange with their regional victory with relative ease. I believe the coach of the Vols 12-0 in regional play. I believe something like that. So I'm not gonna rub it in that the number 1 team in the nation is still playing baseball. So
I mean, if they're the number 1 team in the nation, it's fine.
I guess, and you probably should win the regional round of action. So lots of stuff to do today on the show. If you want to get into the comments and jump in, have fun with us, we would appreciate it. So come on in. If you want to give us a little thumbs up on the YouTube page, give us a subscription there. We would appreciate it, and share, of course, the product on Facebook, Twitter if you're watching live, and of course if you're listening on the podcast app, rate, review, and subscribe. We would really appreciate it. All right, these Juuse Saros rumors, guys. Just not going anywhere. And Emma, you had a piece, of course, for the Hockey News about how the asking price and the conversation around New Jersey's 10th overall pick is silly. Look, there are obvious ties here as to why the story is going to stay in the news. Juuse Saros is the number 1 trade chip for the Nashville Predators. They are in this sort of pseudo rebuild situation. They've got an elite prospect potentially ready to go. That's going to cause people to rationally think that he's contract expiring in a year. It all just sort of is sort of rational stuff. The New Jersey Devils, the general manager, has ties to the Nashville Predators organization, has worked with the Nashville Predators former general manager as recently as last year's draft. They desperately need a goaltender, and they have lots to offer. There's a pretty natural marriage here for the conversation. It does not mean that the two teams have gotten any farther than, hey, are you interested? Yeah, maybe. What you got? Nope, that's not enough.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably exactly how the conversations have gone. I think like you said, there are like a lot of ties, and like you said, as long as Juuse Saros remains unsigned to a contract extension, he will be floated out in these rumors, in these conversations. That's just the fact of it. But I think you also have to look at where both the Devils and the Predators are in terms of their organizational timelines, because, you know, for the Devils, I think, or for the Predators rather, I think the kind of asking price that Barry Trotz is going to have for Juuse Saros, yes, the Devils have those pieces, but they're not going to be willing to part with them because those are the pieces that they're trying to build their team around. And then in the reverse, if you trade Juuse Saros, if you're Nashville, that sets the timeline back a lot for your reset, your competitive rebuild, whatever you want to call it, that you're in right now. So I think that you just on the surface, yes, there's a natural connection there, but I think if you look a little bit deeper than that, that's kind of where it starts to fall apart, at least for me.
Yeah, I think you also have to keep in mind too that it's not just about trading Juuse Saros. I mean, yeah, that's the main thing we're talking about, but also does Barry Trotz want to commit $8 million a year or more to a goalie? Probably for I'm assuming Saros would want at least a 5-year contract, maybe even longer. Does he want to commit that amount of money to a goalie for that long? And the wild card we don't really know is, what does Barry Trotz think of Askarov? I know I've had some people in Milwaukee be like he is not really okay with the showboating and just the general theatrics of him. If Barry Trotz really does not want a player like that in the organization, maybe he wants to trade him. Maybe he thinks Askarov will bring him back a better trade package than Saros does. So I think it's not just about finding the right team, right fit trade wise, and getting back good players and stuff like that. It's also like, who does Barry Trotz envision as the long-term starter in Nashville? And I don't know if we have an answer to that yet.
Well, and I agree with you, Emma, that I just don't think it's like really a possibility. But a trade for a big time player in any sport is never a possibility until all of a sudden someone decides to pay the price. And I don't remember what you said exactly at the end of your story, but basically it's, you know, probably 2 draft picks, maybe 2 young players, or the 10th overall pick and 2 young players. Maybe it's a high level prospect, a young player, and a draft pick. Like it's going to have to be overwhelming. And I agree that when you look at the market, there are lots of goaltenders that New Jersey or any other team could go after. None of them are as good as Juuse Saros. And none of them are making only $5 million last year and are as good as Juuse Saros. So it's okay. I think it's okay. While it feels like it's a tough situation to be in if you're the Preds, because you're kind of straddling this, like, we've got a goaltender that can win versus we got a prospect versus rebuilding versus we made the playoffs. There's a lot of sort of like lines that are blurred there. Like at the end of the day, you should ask for a lot for Juuse Saros. And I am totally okay with the asking price being really, really, really high. I am coming around on it's more likely he trades Askarov and gets a major piece moving forward. The 10th overall pick is not good enough for any of this stuff. And because the 10th overall pick is Matthew Wood, and that could be a player that is great, or it could be a player that's not, and it could be something that you don't even see on the roster for 3 years.
I just think that, again, the Devils definitely have pieces that the Preds would be interested in for a Juuse Saros type trade, but the Devils are not in they're not having a fire sale right now. If the Devils were in like total rebuild mode, we could be having a different conversation, and they're like willing to sell off, you know, some of their top young players or whatever. But I think with Askarov, I like what you said, that he could get a more reasonable return, because I think the kind of package that Barry Trotz and the Predators are going to be asking in return for Juuse Saros is not something that the Devils, or probably a lot of teams, would be willing to part with. I think the asking price for Askarov could be a lot more reasonable, but you still could get a lot in return. I think the value match would make more sense there. But then again, talking about organizational timeline, where the Devils are at right now, did they really want to bring on a project like Askarov? Not saying a project in terms of just like
time. It takes time.
Yeah, like skill wise, he's there, but he's not a proven NHL goalie yet, and the Devils have made it clear they want a proven NHL goalie.
Yeah, and we already know that Barry Trotz asked for Dawson Mercer in the Juuse Saros trade around the deadline, and Tom Fitzgerald kind of was like, no, that's a non-go for us, because like Emma said, Mercer is one of those young pieces the Devils are counting on to carry their offense if they are to make runs at the cup over the next couple of years, and they need a goaltender to do that because their goaltending was just garbage last year. But anyone else on that roster, like they're all the young players the Predators would want back. Alexander Holtz, I think Seamus Casey would probably interest them. That's someone they're going to be counting on the next couple of years. So all of those players, New Jersey doesn't want to let go. And I know you have to give something up to get something great. It feels like the media, maybe we contribute to this because we talk about it so much. It just feels like everyone's trying to force New Jersey and Nashville together to make a damn trade. And it's just not going to happen. I don't see it happening. I know that Fitzgerald and Trotz have a good relationship, and if anyone could probably get Trotz to come down on his asking price, it probably would be Fitzgerald. But all the pieces that New Jersey has that Nashville wants, they don't want to give that up. They don't want to create a hole on the roster just to fill another hole. So again, it's if I'm New Jersey, I'm going after Linus Ullmark, or I'm going after Jacob Markstrom. I'm going after a goaltender who's not quite as good as Saros and isn't going to cost me as much, but is still good enough to be a goaltender on what is a really good roster. The fact that they did not make the playoffs last year, that speaks more to the head coaching job than I think it was the players. The players certainly underachieved a little bit, but when you have players as talented as New Jersey does, and I think Sheldon Keefe is going to be a fantastic head coaching ad too. If you go out and you get Ullmark or you get Markstrom, I think you're not going to be as good as you would be with Saros, but I think that that's good enough to get you to where you want to go. And it's not going to cost you as much in terms of prospects and players giving up to acquire those guys.
And New Jersey still has Jake Allen under contract. I mean, they only had 5 goalies play for them last year, but the only one that they still have under contract is Jake Allen. Now, understand he's 33 years old. He's not going to be the guy that you're building a team around as your franchise goalie, but that's some stability there as like your backup, for example. And I think that I've been pushing the Ullmark trade for New Jersey. I think that makes complete sense because I think that
could Vezina 2 years ago.
Yeah. And like that could be, and Boston isn't going to be asking as much for him as Nashville will for Saros because Boston has Jeremy Swayman. Like
and he's not as good. Like, let's be very
well. He's not as good, but
clear.
he's not as valuable to that team. So I think it just and also in our defense for the media contributing to the whole New Jersey Nashville thing. Listen, people, it's the off season. We need something to talk about. Okay. So if it's out there, we got to talk about it.
Well, and first of all, I think Juuse Saros would win a lot of games for Boston. I'm just going to throw it out there. I think if you put Juuse Saros on that team with those players and that situation, I think his numbers would look a lot different than they did the last few years for the Predators. So I think, it's a pretty good situation that Ullmark's been in the last few years. So I think, but I do agree. He's asking, like, you're going to get him for a lot cheaper than I think you would for Juuse Saros. And he probably solves a lot of your problems if you're New Jersey. And you're not going to trade all these pieces away because, like you said, Emma, if they're in rebuilding mode, Juuse Saros does you no good, which is the issue for the Predators. Because here's the other thing. Just play this out and let him play out the contract. Let's just hypothetically say that he plays out the contract and they let him walk because the Scarov's ready to go. I think fans instantly, and I would do the same thing. I think you guys would too. Like, it's going to feel really gross and bad and disgusting if Saros walks away and you get nothing for him. But at the end of the day, like looking at the Alex Carrier situation this year, could have traded him at the deadline. They didn't. They kept him. I think it's okay to be like, man, they probably should have moved him because I don't think Alex Carrier did a lot to like, they weren't going to lose more games in the playoffs or down the stretch without Alex Carrier. You know what I mean? Saros is worth the money and worth keeping on your roster to give yourself a chance to win next year in the postseason or in the down the stretch or whatever, and is maybe worth taking that risk of losing him for nothing because he is the linchpin of the postseason run. Does that make sense?
I don't think
like,
you
even
lose
if
him for nothing though, because even if you decide Askarov is your future net, I still think there's a good chance he gets re-signed this year when July 1st happens. Like I think Trotz is working on an extension, so I don't think if you're a Preds fan you have to worry about losing him for nothing because he's. In my opinion, it's you either trade him now or you extend him and you trade him a year or two from now. I don't see Saros walking away for nothing because I think Barry Trotz is too smart to let that happen.
No, I completely agree. I'm trying to present like the worst case scenario, right? Like the worst case scenario for fans, what they are worried about in this conversation is Saros leaving, quote unquote, for nothing. But my argument is it's not really for nothing if he's your goaltender for the last 30 games of the season and in the playoffs. And that helps you win some games. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you're not good enough. But at the end of but that's a decision they have to make at the deadline. I agree with you. They are trying to get an extension done. They're going to extend him, and then it's probably more likely he's traded 2 years from now or 3 years from now during that next contract than it is right now. So Josh Wright says it's a two goalie league, and Saros needs more of a break during the year. Why not have an elite goalie tandem? It's not a terrible idea, Josh.
And said that multiple times that there's absolutely no reason that Juuse Saros needs to be starting as many games as he is.
Yeah, for the third year in a row, we've been saying that. Max says, but what's going on with the Askarov then? Back up next year to Saros? I mean, I think that's conventional thinking that halfway through the year, at some point, he's ready to be a backup and sort of like start to get his feet wet at the NHL level. I think if you're Barry Trotz and Andrew Burnett, that's what you want, is for him to be probably, I don't know, what do you guys think? Like midway through the season, he's ready to go, and he can sort of really help spell Juuse Saros, and then Saros can be the guy down the stretch. I don't know. Does that sound right?
I've said this multiple times. He's ready to be a backup in the NHL right now. He has nothing left to prove in the AHL. He can handle a 20 to 25 start workload next year, and he can do what Juuse Saros was doing in 2016, 2017 when he was starting 20, 25 games, backing up Rinne. That everyone. I get it. Askarov is the shiny new toy, and everyone wants to take him out and play with him, and they want him on the ice at all times. And I get it. It's very tempting when you have a player of that caliber. But he's not ready for that. But he is ready to be a backup, because a backup means you're doing 20, 25 games. Maybe you have Troy Grosenick start another game or two, because I'm assuming he's probably going to be the starter in Milwaukee. Maybe you sign another veteran. Like, you need to get Juuse Saros from 67 starts down to 60, 55 to 58, somewhere in there if possible. But I think everything hinges on what Kevin Lingan does. If he gets a starting offer that he deems is acceptable, it's a better situation than being a backup on the Predators next year, and he's gone, then, I mean, who are you going to go out and sign? Because I'm looking at the free agent goaltender market, and there's not really a lot of, I mean, Casey DeSmith, maybe. I mean, you saw him, and he was okay. There's not really a lot of great backup goaltenders out there, and I think having Askarov be your backup over signing a free agent on a 1 year deal, I think, is a lot better. But if Lincoln wants to come back here, then it makes sense to keep him as the backup, and you keep Askarov playing in Milwaukee, getting regular playing time, and I think that's best for his development. But he absolutely is ready to be a backup in the NHL, in my opinion.
I feel like the halfway mark for me is the argument for, like, I want to get him a lot of regular reps for a little bit longer so that he stays, because that's like better, like you just said, Michael, better for his development. And then like halfway through, you're like, all right, it's time for you to get as many reps as possible on the NHL level and give Juuse Saros a break during the most strenuous time of the season, which is February normally. February is when players will tell you, like, this is the worst month. We hate this month.
But if you have him as a backup on your NHL roster and he's playing like he is in Milwaukee, then maybe you go from 20 starts to 30 starts, and maybe you can get Saros down to 58 starts. And maybe he's better than you think he will be, and that allows you to rest Saros a little bit more, and maybe Saros is getting 5 more games of rest compared to what he was this year, something like that. I think the path is there for it to work out for everybody.
I still worry, though, that, like, I'm not convinced. I totally agree with everything you're saying, Mike, and I think that makes total logical sense. But if we were going purely based on logic, then Kevin Lingan would have started more games last year too, and he didn't. And like, Kevin Lingan has been a fantastic backup. And so I think, if we're coaching the team, then yeah, I'd be like, bring Askarov up, have him start 20, 30 games, whatever. I don't trust that the Predators coaching staff will do that with Askarov next year. Maybe they will. Again, I'm not saying I don't think they will, but they haven't proven, at least to me, that they're willing to lessen Juuse Saros' workload, even though I think that they had every reason to. Like, it's one thing when David Riddick was your backup, but like when you have Lingan and he's really solid against playoff teams on the road, like, why are you not starting him more again?
No, I agree, and I think the franchise as a whole, they tend to, I don't know what the term would be, when you have a goaltender that's that good, regardless of who your backup is, it's tough to want to pull him out and not have him in the net every night. I mean, going back, and even when you had Chris Mason, you had Saros, you had Anders Lindbach, you had some pretty solid backup goaltenders here over the years. I mean, Rinne's still starting 64, 73, 64, 66.
73.
Yeah, he started 73 games in 2011, 2012. He went 43, 18, and 8. Like, that year was insane that you have a goaltender starting 73 out of 82 games. But regardless, this franchise...
What a horse, man.
Yeah. This franchise has always been resistant to playing the backup more than they probably should and resting the starter more than they probably should, regardless of whether it's Saros, Rene, Vokun, whoever the hell is in net. I think
that's basically all the 3 goaltenders that have ever played for the Preds, by the way. Like that's every game.
So I don't know if this is a Trotz thing or if it's a Brunette thing, but someone has to be like, look, if Saros is our long-term answer in goal, he cannot be starting 65 to 70 games a year. That's just he's small, he gets beat up, he takes a lot of punishment. Like, this kid needs more rest. And I think Emma's right. If Askarov was on the roster next year, there probably would be a little bit of hesitancy to play him a little bit more. But at some point, you got to take into account what's better for your starter.
Yeah. Well, and look, I just want my cake. I want to eat it too. I want a second piece. I want to bake another cake. Like, I want all the things, which I think is a combination of all these plans, which is sign Kevin Lankinen to be your backup, to allow Askarov to get as many reps as the one in the AHL for as long as you think you can. Trade Lankinen at the deadline because Askarov's ready to go. Then you get something in return. So then Askarov's ready, and then he gets NHL reps, and you're good both in the first half and the second half at the goaltender position. That's having your cake and eating it at the same time. I want all the cake.
Or plot twist. Kevin Lankinen signs a free agent deal with New Jersey, and New Jersey forces Nashville to promote Askarov because they don't have a backup.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, also, like, with the whole having your cake, eating it too, I think that way also you don't let Lankinen walk for nothing, which you would if he signed somewhere this year. I'm with you. I'm like, like anyone, I'm like, change is bad. We don't want any change. I just want it to be exactly like it was. No, but I think that if it were up to me, Askarov does not start the year in Nashville next year.
I agree. And Max asked this question, and I think this is interesting because in my head, maybe this is the cynic in me, maybe this is the, like, just getting older, but like, I am, because you said we don't want change, but Max says, so what's going on with the rest of the team then? And we weren't going to talk about this necessarily, left wing, second line. What does the third line look like? Same fourth line as last year. I do have like this concern that if they keep it too intact from last year, that you're not going to get career, like, regression from Ryan O'Reilly and Gus Nyquist and Philip Forsberg should be slightly expected. I think progression by Juuse Saros should be expected. They're not going to be as good on defense without Ryan McDonough necessarily, unless there's some corresponding moves. And you're asking the fourth line, who was wonderful this past season, to recreate the thing that they've never done before. So I'm not saying it's not possible, but I think things need to happen. Players need to develop. Moves need to be made. If this team, I think, has an expectation of taking a step forward next season. And so that was not on the rundown here for the show, but that, Max sort of got me going on that. And I think that is something you need to think about. Replicating everything that happened this year might be hard to do.
Well, when I say I don't want change, I mean in the crease. I don't want change. With the rest of the team, we can, I'm with you. We can have a lot of conversations about that, but I don't want change in net.
Okay,
I think the change comes in the middle six, though. Like, I think the top line's staying the same. I think the fourth line is going to stay the same, or at least 2/3 of the fourth line is going to be the same. I think the middle six is where you're going to see change because Barry Trotz has made it clear he wants to upgrade scoring, he wants to upgrade speed, he wants to upgrade physicality, and the players he had playing in the middle six last year didn't quite play up to what he wanted. So
I've got one name that I think I want to float to you guys. It's a name we've talked about before. It's not Mitch Marner, who's not a free agent, but I am going to float a name for you guys in just a second to try to do that and try to.
I'm glad we're all finally realizing Mitch Marner's not a free agent. Barry Trotz can't legally talk about him.
All right, so quickly, this ties into the Jersey conversation. Though. They've got the 10th pick. I am curious. I want to do a quick NHL primer, like 101 NHL Draft 2024. It's going to happen at the Vegas Sphere, ironically, June 28th.
Will you two be playing?
Well, where you two will not be playing. Neither will any of the Predators, but they've got the 22nd pick in the draft. Of course, they've got a ton of picks from other teams. Obviously, Edmonton continuing to win doesn't help, but whatever. So we'll get to the Stanley Cup Final in just a second. But I'm curious, like, what do people need to know about this draft class? Certainly, Macklin Celebrini is going to be the number one pick. Rick Celebrini's kid. He is not, as good as Connor Bedard, but he is. It sounds like a pretty solid number one overall pick. what do people need to know? Like, what do folks need to know about the first round and about this draft class in particular? Sort of top level 101 sort of introductory primer here.
I would say so. And this kind of ties into what we were talking about a little bit earlier with possibly acquiring New Jersey's first round pick. The stigma that this isn't a good draft, that it's average, like no one getting whoever you would get with the number 10 pick if the Predators were to acquire it is bad. I think we need to debunk that because this is actually a really good draft. And the draft is really deep at center and it's really deep at defense. Arguably the two positions that I would say the Predators need to address in this draft and kind of build their pipeline up. Sure, Macklin Celebrini is going to be the number 1 overall pick. And there's a lot of scouts that are convinced that if he would have came out last year, he would have been number 2 overall right behind Bedard. I don't think he's on the same level as Bedard, but the gap between him and Bedard is a lot closer than the gap between Bedard and Carlson and Fantilli, who went 2nd and 3rd last year. I think Celebrini is going to be a really good player. It's still interesting to see whether he's going to sign with whoever drafts him, which is probably going to be San Jose, or if he goes back to college next year. He's still undecided about that. But there's Ivan Demidov, who is favored to go number 2 overall. There's a lot of scouts that believe he's actually better than Matvei Michkov was last year. And obviously being a Russian playing in the KHL, kind of seeing how things are going over there. It's curious to see because the rumors are Michkov is coming over to the NHL this year, and we all thought that was probably 2 or 3 years away last year. So the top of the draft's got a lot of intrigue, but I do think the fall off kind of happens around the number 12 overall, somewhere in there. Because if the Predators were to acquire that number 10 overall pick, there's still a lot of good players that could be acquired with that pick. I mean, Cole Yzerman, Berkeley Catan, Konsta Helenius, Caden Lindstrom, Tisha Ginla. There's a lot of players, and most of those guys are centers. So I do think that the draft is pretty loaded with center and defensemen, and a lot of them are going to go early. So if you're the Predators and you're sitting at pick 22, you kind of hope some of those players kind of fall to you a little bit, kind of like what happened with Kemmel a couple years ago when he fell to 17th overall. I think you're kind of hoping something like that happens. But I mean, you're looking at, if you're the Predators and you're just kind of picking at pick 22, I mean, you're kind of hoping someone like Sasha Boisver, Jet Luchenko, someone like that kind of falls, and because they're projected to go 15 to 20 somewhere in there.
Yeah, I think that every year the draft class is going to be determined like, oh, this is a really solid class, it's a really deep class, this is a bad class, whatever. But there's going to be guys that come out of every single draft class, and so and sometimes, I mean, you never know what you're going to get. Like, you could end up with Juuse Parssinen in the 7th round. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. And so to me, for this class, I think the drop off is probably, I would say like around like 11 to 12 is where you really kind of start to see the drop off. But I also don't think that 10th is necessarily high enough for the Predator. Like, of all the guys that you just mentioned, the centers and some of the defensemen, I don't know that there's anyone in that group. I mean, this is just me, like, my opinion. I don't know if there's anyone in that group that Barry Trotz is going to be like, okay, we have to trade up to get that guy, because I think that there's so much of like a mushy middle around the number 10 spot that like some of the guys that you're looking at might already be gone by then, or they might not go. They might fall into like 15th or 20th. So I don't know. I don't look at anyone in that class and think like the Predators need that guy. And like you said, there's a lot of depth at center and at defense that I think there's still going to be a lot of good options by the time the Preds pick at number 22.
I will disagree a little bit. I don't think the 10th overall pick is as valuable as it would be in most years. But I do think there are 3 guys there that if they happen to fall to number 10 and that deal's on the table and Barry Trotz can swing it, I think he would. And that's Berkeley. I don't know if it's Catone or Catton. I'm probably messing it up, but I think Berkeley Catton's 1, Caden Lindstrom is another, and Tisha Ginla is a 3rd. All 3 of them are centers, and you're talking about the number 2, 3, and 4 centers ranked by pretty much every scouting service behind Macklin Celebrini. I think if 1 or 2 of those players are still sitting there and that trade's on the table, Trotz considers it if he's not sold on Saros. But I think purely from the 10th overall pick perspective, I think Iginla, Lindstrom, and Catton, I think all three of those guys could be potential game changers. Yes, it doesn't help you this year. I understand that. But 2-3 years down the road, I think all three of those guys are going to be fantastic centers. And arguably, they could be the number one center this team has never had before. And I think that's something that Barry Trotz is considering, too. He's already got a bunch of picks. And yes, I get it. If Nashville were to trade up for the number 10 overall pick with New Jersey, it's going to take a lot more. But if you can somehow get the number 10 overall pick, Alexander Holtz, and like a low-level, B-level prospect from New Jersey for Saros, and you don't want to sign Saros long-term, I think that's a deal you consider.
So I think it also needs to be said, and is, again, sort of like along our lines of our conversation about Saros, it's just sort of some obvious stuff here. As a reminder, the Preds have 3 second-round picks, 2 third-round picks, and 2 fourth-round picks. And at 22, if Barry Trotz wants to move up and sort of, instead of taking, I guess that would be, if I'm doing some quick math, like 10 players in the first 4 rounds, if you want to get rid of some capital and move up and consolidate to just 2 or 3 really high-level prospects and move up, you could absolutely do that. There's enough draft capital there for them to do it.
I think the most likely scenario is what we saw a couple years ago when they took Svechkov and they traded both of their second-round picks to move back up into the end of the first round and get Leroux. I think that's more plausible because you have 3 second-round picks. I don't know who's on their draft board and who they value over everyone else and all that stuff, but I do think if there's a player that they like that may go early in the second round, that we could see them package a couple of those second-round picks, move back up into the latter half of the first round, and end up with 2 first-round picks, kind of like they did a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing here is, you guys have both mentioned this. I agree with you. It seems to be a much deeper defensive class, and not just deep from like a depth standpoint, second round, third round, late first round, which, remember last year, there was a lot of disagreement after like 1 or 2 guys on defense. There was a lot of sort of like, who do you value? Who do you like? And Trotz sort of got his guy in Tanner Molendyk. I do think defense needs to be a focus if they're drafting. You can look at all the farm system and just see that they don't have elite top flight blue line prospects like they've had in the past. So they do need to address that. I think that's why they went and got a bunch of forwards last year, was the class was better. But I think I was looking, I don't remember if it was, and I should have written this down, whether it was Wheeler or Prongman from The Athletic. I don't remember, but last year he had 25 defensemen in his top 100. He's got 38 defensemen in his top 100 this year. That alone's a number. And he says the top 5 defensemen in this class would have been number 1 last year. So if you are looking for one of those top 4 or 5 defensemen and you need to go to 8 to get them, or 10 or 12, they have the ammunition to go get one of those wherever they view the line. And I don't know enough about this stuff to know where the drop off in defenseman is. But if an expert's saying there's 5 guys that would have been the number 1 defenseman in last year's class, that at least you want to try to go up and get one of those guys if you're going to make a move. So other than that, it's center. So strategically,
I feel like the drop off for the defenseman is probably around 7 or 8, because I'm looking at Scott Wheeler's rankings and he's got Levshunov 3rd overall, Zeev William 4th, Zane Parikh, who I really, really like. He's number 5, Sam Dickinson 6th. I think that's kind of the drop off. You can get Silyev later on, round 9, 10, somewhere overall. I think the top 10, there's probably a good chance you see 6 defensemen go, maybe.
Which is maybe why they're interested in being in that area. That's all. And again, I don't know where the drop-off is or where they view the drop-off to be. But it is worth noting, much deeper defensive class, lots of ammunition in the middle rounds to go up and get somebody if they want.
If you stay at 22, there's still some pretty good defensemen that'll fall there. I don't know if they're Tanner Molendyk level, but Aaron Kivaharju could be there. Cole Hudson maybe at the beginning of the second round. Maybe he's someone like that you trade up to the end of the first round to get, because he could be gone by the time you pick in the second round. I think that's someone worth watching. There's a couple other guys, Henry Muse, EJ Emery. There's defense is really deep. You're gonna get a really good player probably into the beginning, middle of the second round, and the Predators are really good at finding those second round defensemen.
Let's see. Max says, I 100% agree with Michael. Those 3 center guys will be those center guys. I like that. Those 3 center guys will be the first centers and stars. And he says, but if Trotz wants to go up in the order, those guys won't be there together with Josi and Forsberg. So the trade come on, Max. I can't read your stuff like that right off the air. Is it just picks to get that high up? Can you move just picks? Can you move 22 and like 2 seconds and go to number 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, somewhere in there? Or is that not enough?
No. You're probably going to have to include one of your first rounders next year to do that if you're just doing picks.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Okay. So we just mentioned, and if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe, thumb up there. We do thumbs up there. We do appreciate it. And of course, on Twitter or Facebook, give us a retweet and share the product there as well. Podcast app, rate, review, and subscribe. I know you guys hear that a lot when you listen to digital products, but we do appreciate it a lot. And it's what helps people find us. And right now, Nashville Predators coverage, we just give us some support. We appreciate it. All right, I got a name. I don't know. I don't love that this is how my brain is working and how I was looking at all the free agents, and I'm thinking about what the team needs and where they're at. And we've talked a lot about long-term big contracts not being, Barry Trout's cup of tea. And I keep looking at the list, and I keep looking at the Preds' needs, and I keep looking at the salary cap space, and I've come completely around on Stamkos. I've come totally around on this. I want to hear. No, don't shake your heads. If you're watching on YouTube, they immediately both started shaking their heads.
I feel like this is playing out like a Jared Stillman segment.
No. Just let me make the case. And I'm not saying it's what they should do, but I'm starting to see it. And I can't help the way the heart wants what the heart wants. I can't help it. It just started happening. I was looking at the list going like, these guys are not like Jonathan Marchessault. He's a really good player. I don't want to go spend 5 years on a 33-year-old. Like it doesn't feel like the move for the Preds. If you could,
Stamkos is 34.
If you can rent, he's not looking for he's not going to be looking for the same contract. I don't think. Maybe he is, and that's a non-starter. But if you want another Ryan O'Reilly type of signing, where yes, maybe you overpay to get a short deal, 1 year, 2 year, maybe it's a rental. I view it as a veteran goal scoring rental, guaranteed to give you 35 to 40 goals. Yes, it's going to cost you some money, but it could be off the books in 1 year or 2 years. If you can keep the contract very short, he's going to be a casualty at Tampa probably. And he's a glue guy. He's one of these guys that everybody respects and he's a championship guy. Like, I just think you want to put automatic goal scoring production into this lineup and spend money for it and not be on the hook long term and not affect your rebuild. I can see the argument. I was arguing with myself about this.
You don't need a glue guy. You have O'Reilly. You have Nyquist. You have Luke Shen, who Barry Trotz looped into there. You already have your serial winners. You don't need any more. You don't need a 34-year-old, soon to be 35-year-old.
You can't have enough of those guys. That's not the reason.
Yes,
that's
you
not
can.
the reason I'm saying to go sign him.
If you put a 34-year-old Steven Stamkos in this lineup, he is taking away a spot from a younger guy. You need to get younger. You need to get faster. You need to get bigger, and you need to get someone who can put the fucking puck in the back of the net.
Show me that guy you're going to get. Show me that guy.
I know Stamkos can put up 30, 40 goals, but he's also too old and he's too slow to play the way that Andrew Burnett wants to play over an entire season.
Show me the guy then. Show me where that guy is. Go ahead.
Give me more time to prepare than, oh, hey, let's go sign Steven Stamkos. Give me your reaction. Like, give me 5 minutes to go look it up.
From the
Sam Reinhart. There you go. Sam Reinhart. He's 28 and he needs a 40 goal scorer.
Emma needs the floor here in a second. But 40 goal scorers, that are 26 years old, you don't just go find those guys. They don't exist.
I argue Philip Forsberg would have been a 40 goal scorer had he had the right coach.
Okay. Marty Necas, he's not a 40 goal scorer, but he's close. Like that's a guy too. Anyway, I think if you're looking from the Tampa perspective too, you don't bring back Ryan McDonough just to get rid of Steven Stamkos. Like I don't see that happening.
It's weird. The McDonough thing is weird. If you're
Stamkos also, he's not taking a 1 or 2 year deal. Like he wants to. He's gonna whatever team he plays for next year is gonna be the team he retires on.
I think I don't see him leaving Tampa. Like honestly, I could see him signing because of all the reasons we just mentioned. I see him signing a team friendly deal to retire with Tampa.
Hometown discount, whole deal. Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. And again, I am not even admitting that I liked that this is what I started thinking about. I'm willing to admit I didn't enjoy it because when we talked about Steven Stamkos a couple of weeks ago, and I was just like, no, that doesn't make any sense. And then I started, in theory, 2 years, 18 million for 80 goals. It's kind of exactly what this team needs because you don't want a longer term, like you don't want to spend on a guy unless he's like 24, 25, 26 years old. And I know, Michael, you've mentioned a bunch of those names, but they're really hard to get. Like there's a reason these guys don't move a lot, or if they do, they're extremely expensive. And both of you have already said, like, they're not, Barry Trotz is not giving out a another Forsberg or Yossi type of contract, right? So I don't know how they go get. I'm looking for guaranteed.
You trade for him, which is what they're trying to do, which is why they have all of these picks that they've acquired, because Barry Trotz has alluded several times, I have all these picks. I don't plan on making them. I think if they go and get that scorer, it's going to be through a trade. Look, I love Steven Stamkos. I've enjoyed watching him over his career. If this was 6 years ago, I'd be on board, because you're talking about a 28-year-old goal scorer in his prime. You're talking about a 34-year-old guy who, yes, he had 40 goals and 81 points this year, but he's also...
He's also playing with Nikita Kucherov and Braden Point.
He's playing with a lot better.
What are you talking about? Colton Sissons don't get on the puck in positions to score. What are you talking about?
I just look. He's great now. I'm not so sure that his drop off doesn't happen next season. And if you go out and you give him $9 million a year and you expect 40 goals and he gets hurt and he plays 25 games and he gives you 6 goals, like, then what?
Absolutely full of risk. I totally agree. I think, again, I the only reason I started thinking this too was that you could get him at a discount because of his age and that potential risk. But
yes, again, like Josh is saying,
you know,
I've been beating the Trevor Zegras drum for the last 3 months. If you want a goal scorer, you want a center, go get Zegras.
Okay,
you have the ammunition to go get him. You don't need Steven Stamkos.
I know we've talked about this a lot. How many of these other names are guaranteed? Like, again, not guaranteed. If healthy, Stamkos is guaranteed to get to the goal number that we're talking about here. How many of these other names are guaranteed that? Like, there's just not many guys that are, like, there's very few players that can sort of hit that goal scoring mark. Like, he's just a.
Are we talking about free agents
in the net? I mean, honestly, that, like, otherwise I don't know what you can trade unless you're getting a player at a sort of a, I don't know if it's because it's a contract year situation or like why you're getting a player at a discount. Like, if you can't get the 10th overall pick for 3 2s and a 1, like, why are you going to get an established star?
Are you talking about free agents or RFA? Like, what are we talking
about?
No,
here? Everything included. Like, if you're talking about the trade or like, how are you going to go guarantee yourself second line elite level scoring without giving up a whole lot to get it?
I don't think you can. Yeah, I don't think you can guarantee it. But I think if I'm sitting there and I'm going to commit $9 million a year to a player, I would rather give it to Sam Reinhart, who's 28 and is still in his prime, than give it to Steven Stamkos, who I think is past his prime and is 34. Other than that, I don't really think there's anyone else in the free agent market that's worth taking that kind of gamble. Okay. Jake Gensel, maybe, but I'm just not convinced, because Jake Gensel played most of his career with Sidney Crosby, and I'm not convinced he's that guy without Sidney Crosby. Everyone else,
I agree.
Teuvo Teravainen, like, maybe him, but he's not a 40 goal scorer. Like, that guy is not available in free agency. Sam Reinhart is the only player that makes sense, and he has a history of playing with Andrew Brunette and had a really good season under Andrew Brunette. But if you go out and get that guy, you're going to have to trade for him. You're going to have to go and trade for Marty Necas. You're going to have to trade for a Zegras. You're going to have to trade for someone. I don't know. I doubt Casey Middlestad's available, but someone like that. You're going to have to give up something. And you have 8 picks in the top 2 rounds of the next 2 drafts. Like, use them. You're not going to take all those players. Go ahead and use them.
So you guys love the idea. I just like spending cap money and not capital. You can go get a defenseman for cheaper. I don't know.
Take the money you were going to use on Stamkos and go sign Zadorov.
Okay, that's fair, and that makes the team better. I agree.
Sign Zadorov, trade for Zegras, problem solved. You can have your cake and eat it too.
Just that
easy.
It's
that easy. I'm telling you, just do it.
Just go get Zegras. No problem. Go get a young, promising player. No problem. People trade them all the time.
This general manager thing isn't that hard, guys.
All right, I wanted to see, because basically what was happening was I was looking at the list of what are the options for the Predators to go spend money on, and that was sort of what I was looking at, just looking at the list. And there's not one that I feel like could be available at a price point that and is not a lot of term, but guarantees you a certain thing, which is puck in net, and that is. Like, he's probably the best pure shooter on the free agent market. And I don't know, like, you could do worse if you're just spending money. And I don't disagree. If you could get Zegras, great. That's more complicated. It's harder.
I think maybe a more affordable plan B would be Elias Lindholm. He's not going to be $8 million a year, but he's probably going to be $6.5 million a year. I think that would be a stable number 2 center. But other than Lindholm, Sam Reinhart is the only free agent I think that's worth giving a big money contract to, but I don't think Barry Trotz is in the business of giving out big money contracts. So.
Right. Which is sort of why I went to Stamkos, like, well, maybe he'll take a 2-year deal. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. So
in Tampa, he will.
4 years.
Anywhere else, I just can't see it. I think I'm right. I think he will. He'll take a 3-year deal and he'll drop his salary down to like $5 or $6 million to stay in Tampa and retire there. Like she said, you're not going to bring Ryan McDonough back to Tampa if you're sending Steven Stamkos away.
I tend to agree that move in a vacuum doesn't make much sense. To bring $7 million back onto your cap problem. I think they view it as sort of the last hurrah here, right? Like they've got one more run at it. Let's see if they can do it. They're all sort of at the end of their careers. We'll see what happens. So I tend to agree with that. But
that may have been the most passionate I've ever been on this podcast. Like I don't think I've been that riled up in a while.
All I had to do is
you feeling okay?
All right. So Edmonton and Florida, I in the Stanley Cup Final, I find this to be utterly fascinating. I don't know about if you guys are excited. Florida's never won the Cup, of course. Edmonton, Canada, 1993 They haven't won it since 90. Canada hasn't won it since 93. You got the first team returning to the Stanley Cup as a runner-up for the first time since I want to say it was 2009 when Pittsburgh lost and then went back to the Cup. That's what Florida did last year. You've got one of the best defensive teams in the entire NHL versus Connor McDavid and then one of the best offensive teams. I find the matchup to be utterly fascinating. Canada versus Florida for the Stanley Cup championship.
Travel is gonna suck.
Oh, brutal! Absolutely brutal. So, what were your thoughts? Like McDavid was brilliant in Game 6 against Dallas at home. Edmonton looked really, really fun after that. Of course, celebrating their first trip back since 2006. What were your thoughts? What are your thoughts on the matchup, just as a hockey fan, when you see the two teams playing for the Cup?
I think it's a great matchup. Like I love it as a hockey fan. I'm sure the NHL is just probably seething that the Rangers didn't make it to the final. But I mean, hey, like from a pure hockey matchup, I think this is great. I honestly, and I've been saying this for a while, and this is no disrespect whatsoever to Edmonton. I think that they're a great team. I mean, obviously they have Connor McDavid and Draisaitl and all of those guys, but I've been saying for a while that if Florida makes it to the Cup Final this year, they're going to win. I just think that, and again, I'm not saying they're going to go, sweep Edmonton in 4 games. Like I think it'll be a series, but I just think they have too much going for them right now.
Yeah, I think I was torn when I found out what the matchup is because like I really want to see Mattias Ekholm win a Stanley Cup, but also like I just can't root against Florida. I don't know what it is. Like maybe just because they're the underdog, maybe because they're in Florida. Like I don't know what it is. I want to see them win a cup. They haven't done it. They were close last year. They were the best team in the NHL 2 years ago. I don't know. I'm torn because if either team wins, I'm going to be happy. But and also too looking like I feel bad for the goaltenders, man. I'm looking at the playoff scoring leaders: Connor McDavid, Draisaitl, Bouchard, Nugent Hopkins. Like the top 4 scoring leaders in the playoffs play for the Oilers. So good luck, Sergei Bobrovsky. But then you look, Kachuk, Barkov, or Hagee, they're all in the top 10 as well. So like I think it's the goaltenders have the work cut out for them because this series is going to be fast. It's going to be high scoring, and like they're not going to have time to rest at all. Sergei
Bobrovsky is just fascinating to me as a hockey fan because he will go out there and put up a Vezina winning season and then he will just disappear for like 5 years. You never hear about him. You're like, oh, is he seriously though? It's like, oh, is he still playing? Like I kind of forgot about him. And then he'll show up again 4 or 5 years later and he's having a Vezina level season again.
I mean, he won in 2013 and then again in 2017. So 4 or 5 years is about the timeline.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's not like he's like consistently like a finalist in between those years. It's like no, he just like completely disappears and then reemerges like 4 years later. And at age 36, he's having like the season of his life, and I love that for him. And I kind of that's why I'm with you. I would love to see Mattias Ekholm win a Stanley Cup. You want to see McDavid and Draisaitl finally get it too. I think too, though, like looking at Florida, it's like Bobrovsky, 36, like that's probably going to be it for him. So yeah, I don't know.
What makes a great championship in any sport? Number one, you got to have elite talent, and you can't argue that here. Like both sides, just elite players on both sides. Michael, you just read off the list. Like their offense, defense. Like we can. I'm not putting Stuart Skinner in there as an elite player, but like basically, there's elite players everywhere across the board. I don't know why he's catching strays here. Number 2, you need sort of like great strength on strength, like schematic matchups, right? And you certainly have that with Florida's defense and Edmonton's offense. And then you need storylines. I already alluded to this. Florida's never won the Cup. And of course, we know the Canada storyline and we know the Edmonton storyline. But on top of that, and then the last thing you need for it to finish and sort of live up to the expectation is you need great drama. And when you look at the last 6 Canadian teams that have gone, and this is a storyline and drama here, the last 6 Canadian teams that have gone: 2021 Montreal lost in 5 to Tampa, 2011 Vancouver lost in 7 to Boston. You also had Edmonton in 06 lose in 7, Calgary in 04 lose in 7, Vancouver in 94 lost in 7. You are seeing the trend here that 4 of the last 6 times a Canadian team has gone, they have lost in the 7th game. And 4 of those teams have also lost to Tampa Bay, Carolina, Anaheim, and Tampa Bay. What do those 3 have? What do those 4 teams have in common, or 4 years? All warm weather, sunshine, Sunbelt state teams. So to have Canada losing in 7 games to yet another Southern hockey team is a fantastic dramatic storyline. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think
I agree.
It's Florida in 7. That is the pick.
I think that's, and I know we're big in BC now. I'm sorry, guys, but I think Canada's struggles to win a Stanley Cup are just, it's one of the greatest storylines in modern sports. The fact that Canada owns hockey literally anywhere else in any international competition, but they cannot win the damn Stanley Cup. Like, I think that's just hilarious to me.
So here's I'll get your official predictions, but this is what I think. Florida, I think the difference is Bobrovsky and Skinner. I think the difference is the goaltending. I think that's the one area where you can look at these 2 teams and say that this team is better. Although Skinner played brilliantly against the Stars in that Western Conference Final. It is Florida because of experience and because of desire, and because when you lose the Cup and then you get back, it doesn't happen often. It's only happened twice since the 80s. Ironically, the other time it happened was the Oilers in 84. It doesn't happen very often, and when you get back, you win. And I think Florida wins in 7 because of all those reasons. And I think Connor McDavid does win the Conn Smythe because he's Connor McDavid. So, so I don't. Maybe Tkachuk gets it. Maybe Bobrovsky plays well enough to get it. I don't know, but I would. Connor McDavid is your heavy betting favorite to win the Conn Smythe right now. So, and Florida's favored in the series. What's your prediction?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Florida in 7 games. I do think you're right. The goaltending will be the difference. And look, Stuart Skinner has played. Okay, his first 2 rounds weren't so great, but he showed up against Dallas. He really kept them in that series. I don't think he has another Dallas series in him against the kind of offense that Florida has. And you look at Bobrovsky, a 2.2 goals against average. I mean, he's 12-5, a 9-10 save percentage. Like, he's playing pretty well. He's playing the caliber that we expect. I don't think Stuart Skinner can keep playing the way he did against Dallas. I think that Florida just has too much firepower. Edmonton does as well, but Bobrovsky has a proven track record of being holed up against that kind of competition, and Skinner doesn't. So I think Bobrovsky probably ends up stealing the series for him in Game 7.
Yeah, I will say, just because he has been catching strays, I will say I have been very impressed with Skinner, with the way that he has handled himself since, he lost his starter's net earlier in the playoffs, and the way that he has come back, and been so composed, and like Mike said, playing probably his best series against Dallas. I mean, that takes a lot of maturity, and it takes a lot of poise. And I've been very impressed with him for that. That said, I don't think that he's going to be able to be the kind of goalie who can steal a series for Edmonton. I'm going to go, for the sake of being different, I will go Florida in 6. That's my prediction.
I think I will be fast. All 7 games will be broadcast on ABC, so broadcast television, which is good. A lot of streaming platforms as well. So I'm fascinated to see what the ratings are for this, because I think it deserves our attention as a country, sports country. But I'm curious because Edmonton, being as far out as it is, Draisaitl and those offensive weapons should lure in ratings. Florida, like, again, all the reasons that this is a fantastic hockey matchup. I hope it doesn't get lost on sort of the casual fan. I think the diehards will be obsessed with this series. I think it's going to be a great series for the diehards. I am curious if the casual gets roped into it or not. And I hope they do, because I think if you do, you're going to be treated with a pretty damn good matchup every period. It could be, maybe we're wrong and like Florida just stomps them, or maybe Connor McDavid's on a warpath like every elite player in history to just like destroy the competition and cement his name in the history books. Like he's going to do that at some point. I don't know if it's this year, but I just hope the casuals tune in. So I'm curious what the ratings are, because I think it is absolutely a worthy series in every way, shape, or form for a championship. And I think it's going to be great.
I just looked up the ratings last year. It was 2.6 million per game. And the year before that, it was 4.5 million. So I hope that just because Florida's in it again, fans don't kind of tune out. Because if you give them a fair chance, like they're a very exciting hockey team. They have a lot of good players. They have a really good head coach. Like they absolutely could win the cup this year. I think the ratings will be higher because there's a Canadian team involved and all Canada will be watching. But I would like to see a lot of casual fans give the Florida Panthers a chance because they're a damn good hockey team.
Yep.
And if nothing else, tune in for Paul Maurice alone. The man is a gem. Like at least once a game during an interview, he will drop just an absolutely ridiculous one-liner. And you're like, did an NHL head coach actually just say that on national television? Yes, he did. And if you are a super casual fan and you like don't even care about the hockey, just watch for Paul Maurice.
There you go, folks. That is the Stanley Cup preview, unlike you'll get anywhere else on the internet. No, great stuff and a lot of fun. We got a lot of NHL draft stuff coming up for you guys as well. We've got free agency coming. We got the Stanley Cup final. It's going to be a lot of fun. I believe game 1 is on Saturday evening, 7:00 Central Standard God's time. And so everybody tune in and check it out. We'll be keeping track of it, of course, as we continue with your Predators coverage all summer long. Emma, where can the good people find you?
The good people can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Emma_Lingan, and the good people can find my work online at the Hockey News, and the bad people cannot find me anywhere. Thank you.
The mute button is powerful. It's powerful. Michael, where can the good people get to you?
You can find me on Twitter at MGSports_. My Blue Sky account is under construction. I will hopefully have that up at some point this week. And my writing, you can find it at TBD. There
you go. There's a tease for you, everybody. Brad, you're welcome. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Brad, for listening. No, don't thank us. Thank you for listening, and thank you guys for hanging out. Thanks to Michael and to Emma as well. My name is Braden Gall. Thank you guys all for listening. We do appreciate it. Enjoy games. I guess it'll be 1 and 2 before we're back with you guys next week. Have a great weekend, everybody. We will talk to you next time. Thanks for listening.